A black waitress's surprise kiss left a millionaire in tears, uncovering a heartbreaking secret. Subscribe and tell us where you're watching us from. The early morning sun came through the old windows of Cafe Bayer, making long shadows on the wooden floor. Emily Carter fixed her apron again and again, even though she had already done it many times that morning. Her curly hair kept escaping from the bun she had tied before the sun even came up. The smell of coffee and sweet sugar was always in the air, making the cafe feel warm and familiar. "Order ready for table 7, called Grace, the cook. She had been working at the cafe longer than Emily had been alive. The sound of plates clanking and food cooking on the stove filled the room, just like it always did. Outside, the streetcar rumbled past the cafe every 15 minutes, always on time. Emily looked at the clock. It was 7:45 a.m., right on schedule. The bell above the door rang, and he walked in, the man she had been noticing for the past 3 months. He always sat at the same corner table. He always ordered the same thing, black coffee and a plain croissant. But today, something was different. His clothes, usually neat, were a little messy. His gray suit had wrinkles, and he had dark circles under his eyes like he hadn't slept well. Emily walked up to his table, trying to sound normal. "The usual?" she asked. She already knew his routine. 1 sip of water, then coffee, careful bites of the croissant while checking his phone. He looked up at her, and for the first time in 3 months, he really saw her. "Yes, please," he said, but his voice sounded heavy, like he was carrying a big burden. Then he added something surprising. "And maybe someone to talk to if you have a moment." Emily blinked. He had never spoken more than a few polite words to her before. She looked around. The cafe wasn't too busy. Grace could handle the other customers. "I'll be right back with your order," she said, her heart beating a little faster, though she didn't know why. When she brought his coffee and croissant, he pointed to the empty chair across from him. "Please, sit. I'm Dorian, by the way. Dorian Wells." Emily froze for a moment, but kept her face calm. She knew that name. Dorian Wells was a famous businessman. His face was sometimes in the newspaper. He was known for being smart, but also a little ruthless. He was also the last person who might have seen her mother alive. "I'm Emily," she said, sitting down. Her mind was spinning. For 3 months, she had been trying to find a way to talk to him, to get close to him. And now he was the one starting the conversation. "Emily," he said her name slowly, as if testing how it felt. Then he sighed. "Do you ever feel like you're living someone else's life? Like everything you've built is just empty?" Emily was surprised. He didn't sound like a powerful businessman. He sounded like someone who was breaking apart. And for some reason, that pain in his voice connected with her own. "Sometimes," she said carefully. "Sometimes we wear a mask for so long we forget what's underneath." Dorian looked at her, really looked at her. Emily felt exposed, as if he could see all her secrets. Then he asked, "What's under your mask, Emily?" His question hung in the air. The morning sun made his hazel eyes shine with golden specks, and suddenly, without thinking, Emily leaned forward and kissed him. The kiss lasted only a few seconds, but it held years of pain, of searching, of hope. When she pulled back, her eyes filled with tears. Dorian sat frozen, his coffee forgotten, his lips still tingling from the kiss. "I'm sorry," Emily whispered. She stood up quickly. "I shouldn't have." "Wait," Dorian called, but Emily had already rushed toward the kitchen. Inside, she leaned against the cool metal refrigerator, her heart pounding. "What have I done?" she whispered to herself, touching her lips. This wasn't part of her plan. She was supposed to take things slow, gain his trust, and find out what happened to her mother 5 years ago. Instead, she had kissed Dorian Wells. And she might have ruined everything. He moved differently now, uncertain and distracted. Before stepping outside, he paused and looked toward the kitchen, as if he could see through the walls. Then he walked out into the bright New Orleans morning. Emily closed her eyes, remembering the last thing her mother ever said to her. Sometimes, baby, the truth comes wrapped in thunder. At the time, Emily hadn't understood. But now, as she watched Dorian walk away, she wondered if she had just created her own storm. That evening, Emily worked her second job at Anon's restaurant. She cleaned silverware without thinking, her mind replaying the morning's events over and over. "You're going to polish that spoon into dust," Carlos, the head waiter, said. "What's wrong?" "Just tired," she lied. The truth was too hard to explain. How could she tell someone she had just kissed a millionaire who might be connected to her mother's disappearance? Her phone buzzed. A text from her sister, Lena. They posted the final notice. "We have 30 days. Emily's stomach clenched. The rent had doubled and they were behind. Even with 2 jobs, there was no way to pay everything, especially with Lena's college expenses and their mother's old medical bills. Late at night, Emily rode the streetcar home. The city lights blurred past. New Orleans at night felt alive and mysterious, full of possibilities and dangers. At home, Lena sat at the kitchen table surrounded by textbooks. "You should be sleeping," Emily said, dropping into a chair. Lena sighed. "Says the woman working double shifts." She looked at Emily closely. "What's wrong? And don't say nothing. You look like Mom did when she was worried." The comparison stung. Their mother had tried to protect them from her troubles. Emily had promised to be different, to be honest with Lena. But how could she explain today? Before she could answer, there was a sharp knock at the door. Nobody visited this late. Emily's stomach twisted. "Who is it?" she called. A smooth voice answered, "My name is Maddie Wells. I believe we need to discuss what happened with my brother this morning." Emily's blood ran cold. She knew that name. Maddie Wells, Dorian's younger sister, the face of Wells Technologies. But how did she find Emily's address? And what did she want? Lena stood beside her, eyes full of questions. Emily squeezed her sister's hand, then opened the door. Maddie Wells stood there, looking completely out of place in their small apartment. She wore a fancy black dress and pearls, so different from the old wallpaper behind her. But her expression wasn't angry. It was interested. "Miss Carter," Maddie said smoothly, "may I come in? I have a proposition that might benefit us both." Emily felt the weight of the morning's kiss, the burden of unpaid bills, and the mystery of her mother's disappearance all coming together at once. She glanced at Lena, who gave a tiny nod. Emily stepped aside. "Come in." As Maddie Wells walked in, Emily felt like she was letting in more than just a person. She was opening the door to secrets she had been chasing for 5 years. Across the city, Dorian Wells stood in his big house, staring out the window. He touched his lips for the 100th time that day, still feeling Emily's kiss. His sister, Maddie, walked in. "You look terrible," she said. "But I suppose I know why." Dorian didn't turn. "You met with Emily. What did you do?" Maddie smirked. "She's not what I expected." Dorian turned to face her, his grip tightening on his glass. "What are you planning?" 2 hours ago, Emily's small apartment felt even smaller because Maddie Wells was sitting in their old armchair. Maddie did not want coffee, but she looked at everything. The big books about medicine, the pictures of Emily and her sister Lena with their mom, and the couch with its patched cushions. "I will be direct," Maddie said, opening her fancy handbag. "This morning, you kissed my brother. By noon, he canceled 3 meetings and spent 2 hours walking in Audubon Park. Dorian never cancels meetings, and he never takes walks." Emily sat up straight. She knew Lena was listening beside her on the couch. "I said I was sorry," Emily said. "It was a mistake." "It was perfect," Maddie said, taking out a brown envelope. "That's why I'm here." She spread out photos on the table. The pictures showed Dorian at parties, business meetings, and award shows. In every picture, he looked serious and alone. "My brother has a name in business," Maddie said. "He is smart but cold. People call him the Ice King of Silicon Valley South. This helps him in business, but we need to change his image. We are about to merge with James Medical, a company that makes medicine for cancer patients. Some people think Dorian's cold nature might make them back out. Lena leaned forward. James Medical? They help sick people? Exactly, Maddie said, smiling. You're smart, Miss Carter. This deal will help many people, but we need Dorian to seem warmer. She turned to Emily. That's where you come in. Emily frowned. I don't understand. But in her heart, she had a bad feeling. I want to give you a job, Maddie said. Go to events with my brother. Make him seem kind. In return, we will help you. No more money problems. Lena sat up straight. How do you know about our money problems? Maddie smiled. I know everything about you. I know you are about to be kicked out of this apartment. I know you have medical bills. And I know you are very smart, Lena. Studying medicine at Tane University isn't cheap, is it? Emily stood up quickly. We don't need your help. No, you don't, Maddie said calmly. But think of it as an investment. 3 months, that's all I ask. Go to events with Dorian, help him look more friendly. In return, we will pay your rent, make sure your apartment stays yours, and even give Lena a scholarship for medical school. Emily crossed her arms. And if I say no, then nothing changes, Maddie said. You will lose this apartment. Lena may have to quit school, and Dorian will stay lonely in his big office. Maddie stood up and fixed her pearls. You have 24 hours to decide. After Maddie left, Lena turned to Emily. You're not thinking about saying yes, are you? We don't have a choice, Lena. It feels wrong to trick someone like that. Emily picked up a picture of Dorian. He looked alone at a party where everyone else was happy. Maybe we aren't tricking him, Emily whispered. Maybe we're helping him too. You had no right to do this, Dorian said, pacing in his study. Maddie sipped her drink. I had every right. You are my brother, and you are unhappy. You have been since Dad died. This morning was the first time you showed any real feelings in years. You don't know what you're doing, Dorian muttered. You don't even know who she is. I know she has secrets, just like you, Maddie said. She touched his arm gently. But I also know that this morning you smiled. Really smiled. I haven't seen that since before Dad's accident. Dorian closed his eyes. He remembered Emily's sad eyes after their kiss. What was she hiding? And why did he feel like he already knew? His phone buzzed, a message from an unknown number. I'll do it. 3 months. But I have conditions. Dorian's heart raced. He thought of her strong eyes, her soft hands, and the way she looked at him like she could see through him. Well? Maddie asked. She said yes. Dorian couldn't hide the surprise in his voice. Maddie smiled as she picked up her things. Of course she did. She needs something from you, Dorian. The real question is, what do you need from her? After Maddie left, Dorian looked out the window. The city lights sparkled like tiny stars. Somewhere out there, Emily was probably wondering if she had made the right choice. He typed a response. Name your conditions. Her reply came fast. Truth. Whatever happens between us, we must be honest. Dorian's hands shook a little as he replied. Deal. But as he hit send, he wondered, what would break first? His walls or the lies they were both keeping? The Roosevelt Hotel's ballroom sparkled like stars trapped in glass. The fancy lights shone on the shiny dresses and golden cups of rich people in New Orleans. Emily looked at herself in a big mirror in the bathroom. She barely recognized herself in the deep blue dress Maddie had sent. Maddie's voice spoke through her earpiece. Remember the story. You met Dorian at your cafe. You became friends. Then romance happened naturally. Emily touched the pearl necklace around her neck, another gift from Maddie. I know the story, but it hurt to change the truth of that morning into something planned. Good. Now go. Dorian is waiting. Emily took a deep breath and stepped out. The dress swished against the floor. She saw Dorian right away. He always stood apart. But tonight he looked different. He was searching for someone. When he saw her, he stopped moving. Upright, he walked over in long strides. You look, he paused, thinking of a word. Uncomfortable, Emily said, laughing a little. These shoes are painful. Dorian almost smiled. I was going to say breathtaking. He leaned close and whispered, We don't have to stay long. Yes, we do, Maddie's voice said in their earpieces. The James medical people are here. Make it count. Dorian sighed and offered his arm. Shall we? The next hour passed in a blur. Dorian was charming, speaking to guests easily, but every few minutes his hand touched Emily's back, or he whispered a joke in her ear, making her smile. An older woman, covered in diamonds, walked up. Dorian, dear, who is this lovely lady? Dorian smiled. Mrs. Beaumont, this is Emily Carter. The woman's eyes changed. Carter? Any relation to Christina Carter? Emily's heart stopped. Her mother's name. Dorian quickly said, Eleanor, I think your husband is looking for you. The woman left, but kept watching Emily. Dorian pulled Emily aside. Are you okay? Emily whispered. How did she know my mom's name? Dorian's face turned blank. New Orleans is a small city. Don't lie, Emily said. You promised truth. Their eyes locked. Dorian sighed. Not here. After the party. Later, when they left, Emily finally asked, Why does everyone know my mom's name? Dorian opened the car door, but hesitated. When he spoke, his voice was heavy with regret. Because 5 years ago, the night before your mom disappeared, she was supposed to testify against my father. Emily never made it to the courthouse. The night air suddenly felt too thin. She held onto the car door for support. You knew, she whispered. You knew who I was all along. Yes, Dorian admitted, just like you knew who I was that morning in the cafe. They stood there, the truth finally spoken. The sounds of the party floated through the warm New Orleans night like music from another world. The big mansion in front of them looked ghostly in the moonlight, its white columns glowing. Dorian led Emily through the front door. The house was filled with paintings worth more than she could ever make in her whole life. Neither of them had spoken during the car ride. The weight of their secrets filled the air. Dorian's study looked different at night. Shadows danced on the walls, flickering across old books and fancy furniture. Outside the windows, the city lights twinkled. Dorian walked straight to the wall and pressed something. A hidden panel slid open, revealing a safe. 5 years ago, he began, pulling out a thick file, I started learning the truth about my father's business. People thought Wells Technologies made its fortune through smart ideas and good investments. He placed the file on his desk, but the truth was much worse. Emily stood still, her fancy evening dress suddenly feeling like a costume. What did my mother find out? She asked. Everything. Dorian spread out photographs on the desk. My father's company was laundering money through fake medical research. They pushed dangerous drugs through approval using fake data. Poor communities were used as test subjects without knowing it. His hands shook slightly. Your mother worked as an accountant for one of these fake companies. She found the proof. Emily picked up a picture of her mother, younger, smiling outside an office building. The federal investigation, she whispered. She was their main witness. The case would have taken down my father and many other powerful people in New Orleans. Dorian poured 2 glasses of whiskey, handing one to Emily. The night before she was supposed to testify, security cameras caught her entering my father's building, but there's no footage of her leaving. Emily's hands shook as she accepted the drink. Where were you that night? Boston, Dorian said, his jaw tight. I was meeting investors. I learned everything 2 days later when the FBI came. By then, my father had already faked his death. The car crash, Emily whispered. Too perfect, too planned. Dorian took a deep sip of whiskey. He died before anyone could question him. Everyone thought his secrets were gone with him. He opened his desk drawer and pulled out a small leather journal. Then, 3 months ago, this arrived in my mail. My father's diary. It's mostly written in code, but there are mentions of your mother, something called Project Lazarus, and a storage facility in the lower 99th Ward. Emily sat down, staring at the whiskey in her hands. Is that why you started coming to the cafe? It's just 6 blocks from that facility. Yes, Dorian admitted. I needed to watch the building without drawing attention. Emily's eyes filled with hurt. So, You used me as a cover? Dorian nodded slowly. At first, but then something changed. You weren't what I expected. You were real. Emily laughed bitterly. Unlike this whole game we're playing? Dorian stepped closer. The kiss wasn't planned, Emily. You surprised me that morning. You keep surprising me. She could smell his cologne, see the tiny gold flecks in his eyes. I was using you too, she admitted. I wanted to get close to you to find out what happened to my mother. I know. Dorian's hand cupped her cheek gently. We're quite the pair, aren't we? Both chasing the truth, both lying to do it. Emily leaned into his touch. Where does that leave us? Partners, Dorian said firmly. No more lies, no more secrets. We work together. A noise in the hallway made them freeze. Dorian moved to the door and opened it. Maddie stood there, looking pale. The storage facility, she said. Someone broke in 20 minutes ago. Everything's gone. Emily's stomach dropped. Gone? What do you mean? Empty. And there's a message spray painted on the wall. Lazarus rises at midnight. Dorian grabbed his keys. Gal, that's in 2 hours. Wait. Emily stopped him. My mother had a hidden safe in her old office. She made me memorize the code when I was 13 in case something happened to her. You never told the police? She made me promise not to. The building has been abandoned since the investigation. No one has been there in years. Dorian checked his watch. We have time to check both places. Maddie, call security. Have them meet us at the storage facility at midnight. I'm coming with you, Maddie said, already pulling out her phone. No, Dorian said firmly. If something happens, the company needs you clean. We can't both go down. Maddie looked like she wanted to argue but nodded. Be careful, big brother. As Dorian and Emily rushed to the car, she caught his hand. Are you sure about this? Once we start, there's no turning back. I've never been more sure of anything, Dorian said. Whatever happens, we face it together. The night swallowed them as they drove away, the quarter moon low and orange in the sky. Neither of them noticed the black SUV that started following them. The abandoned office building on Pyra Street stood dark and empty. Emily's fancy dress and heels felt out of place as she and Dorian moved through the dusty lobby. Their phone flashlights cast eerie shadows. 3rd floor, Emily whispered. Suite 312. Dorian rested a hand on her back as they climbed the stairs. Their footsteps sounded too loud in the stillness. I used to do my homework here after school, Emily said softly. Mom let me help with her accounting work. I didn't know she was secretly collecting evidence. The office door still had her mother's name on it, though the letters were peeling. Inside, the office was frozen in time. Dust covered the furniture. Empty filing cabinets stood open from the FBI search years ago. Emily went straight to the desk. The safe is behind the calendar. Dorian helped move the heavy desk aside. Behind the faded calendar was a small wall safe. The lock was untouched. Do you remember the code? Dorian asked. Emily's fingers trembled as she turned the dial. My birthday, my sister's birthday, the day our father died. Click, click, click. The safe opened. Inside was a single USB drive and an envelope with "For my daughters" written in Emily's mother's handwriting. We should. Dorian started, but a noise in the hallway cut him off. Footsteps. Multiple people. Dorian turned off their flashlights and pulled Emily behind a filing cabinet. They pressed together, barely breathing. Search every office, a man's voice ordered. Emily recognized it instantly. Dr. James, she mouthed to Dorian. The footsteps split up. Someone came closer. Emily clutched the USB drive to her chest. A flashlight beam swept across the room. Emily could hear someone breathing just a few feet away. Then a phone rang. Yes? Dr. James's voice came from the hall. What? No. Keep them away from the storage facility. We'll handle the office. The footsteps retreated. A door slammed in the distance. Dorian and Emily stayed still for 5 minutes before daring to move. When they finally did, they were both shaking. How did they know we'd be here? Emily whispered. They've been watching us, Dorian said grimly. Probably since the party. Outside, two black SUVs waited. "There's another way out," Emily said. "Through the loading dock." Dorian raised an eyebrow. "How do you know that?" Emily smiled a little. "I was a curious kid. Mom worked late a lot, so I explored." They found a way into the basement and walked through old tunnels full of dust and spider webs. It made them cough, but they kept going. Finally, they came out in a parking garage of the building next door. Dorian's car was too far away, and it was too dangerous to go back for it. Instead, he took out his phone and called for a ride. They hid in the shadows, waiting. Emily held the envelope from her mother. Her hands shook as she opened it. Inside was a piece of paper with strange numbers and letters. "It's a code," Dorian said, looking at it. "It's like the one in my father's journal." Emily pointed at some words at the bottom of the page. "The truth is in the numbers, but Lazarus holds the key." Dorian ran a hand through his hair. "Your mother knew about Project Lazarus. This is bigger than we thought." Their ride came, and they got in. The driver looked at them funny. They were dressed in fancy clothes, but covered in dust. He didn't ask any questions. "Take us to the storage facility," Dorian told him. Then he turned to Emily. "Whatever we find there." Emily gripped a small USB drive tightly. No turning back now. As they drove through the dark streets of New Orleans, Emily stared at the code. Why didn't her mother ever use this? What was Project Lazarus? And most of all, was her mother still alive? The moon was high in the sky. A church bell rang in the distance, counting down the minutes to midnight. The storage facility was in a quiet part of the city. A tall fence with razor wire surrounded it. The metal walls were painted gray and looked cold under the moonlight. Their ride disappeared into the night. Dorian and Emily hid behind an old shipping container. "Two guards at the main entrance," Dorian whispered. "But look at them. They don't move like normal security. They're trained soldiers." Emily compared the numbers in her mother's note to a picture of the facility on Dorian's phone. "These aren't just numbers. They're coordinates." She pointed to a spot on the fence. "Right there." They moved quietly along the fence. Emily took off her heels and walked in her stockings. The place her mother's code pointed to looked just like the rest of the fence, except for one thing. The concrete at the bottom was darker. Dorian ran his fingers along it. This was added later. He pressed a small hidden spot. A quiet click sounded, and a part of the fence swung open like a secret door. "Mom always said the best hiding places are in plain sight," Emily whispered. They slipped through and found themselves in a narrow space between two fences. The second fence had small, blinking red lights, motion sensors. "They're still working," Dorian said. "But look at this. The wires don't go to the main security system. Someone set up a separate system here. Someone wanted to know if anyone found this entrance." Dorian checked his watch. 5 minutes to midnight. They followed the secret path until they reached another hidden door. This one led into the storage facility. Inside, red emergency lights glowed over rows of empty storage units. It didn't feel abandoned. The air was too fresh. Emily led the way to the back, following more clues from her mother's note. On the wall, they saw a message sprayed in red paint: "Lazarus rises at midnight." They found storage unit 23B. It looked normal except for a keypad. Emily entered the numbers from her mother's note. "And it's not just numbers," Dorian said. He pulled out his father's journal. "Look, both of these codes fit together." They combined the codes and entered the new sequence. The door slid open with a quiet hiss, revealing something shocking. It wasn't a storage unit. It was an elevator. Dorian held out his hand. "Down?" Emily took it and squeezed. "Down." The elevator moved silently, then opened to a bright white hallway. It looked like a science lab. Something about the place felt wrong. At the end of the hall, double doors were marked. "Project Lazarus." Through the small windows, they saw a huge room with computers and medical machines. In the middle of the room were beds, dozens of them. And on each bed, a person lay sleeping, hooked up to machines. They're not dead, Dorian whispered. They're in some kind of sleep. A voice came from behind them. Suspended animation, actually. Quite an achievement, don't you think? They spun around. A doctor stood there with security guards, but the woman next to him made Emily freeze. She was elegant, calm, and very much alive. "Hello, Emily," she said softly. "You've grown so beautiful." Emily felt dizzy. "Mom?" Her mother, Christina Carter, nodded. "I'm sorry, sweetheart. I had to disappear." "Why?" Emily whispered. "What is all this?" "Wells Technologies created something incredible, a way to keep people alive forever. But your father," she looked at Dorian, "wanted to sell it for war and profit." "So you faked your death?" Dorian said. "And my father's?" The doctor nodded. "He's in there with the others, the people who knew too much." "They're not dead," Christina said quickly, "just asleep. We needed time to make sure this technology is used for good." "And now?" Emily's voice shook. "Why tell us now?" "Because it's time," the doctor said. "We're waking them up." Christina turned to Dorian. "We need you, both of you. We can use this for good. No military deals, no black markets, just saving lives." The church bells tolled midnight. Emily felt the weight of their decision settle deep in her heart. Her mother was alive. Dorian's father was alive. And in this hidden lab under the city, a technology that could change the world was waiting. Dorian took Emily's hand. Whatever happened next, they would decide together. The bright lights buzzed above as Emily looked through the big window. Inside the room, people were sleeping in strange beds. Her mother stood beside her, alive and real, but also feeling like a stranger. In the glass reflection, Emily saw Dorian walking back and forth behind them, running his fingers through his hair. "You look just like I remember," Emily finally said. "How is that possible?" "The treatments," Christina explained. "It's part of the special science we used. It slows down aging." She reached for Emily's hand, but Emily pulled away. 5 years, Emily said, her voice shaking. "For 5 years, I thought you were dead. I watched Lena cry every night. I worked 2 jobs just to take care of us. And you were here the whole time?" "To protect you both," Christina said. "If anyone knew you were connected to this," she pointed at the room. "You protected us by leaving us?" Emily said, her words sharp. Dr. James, a scientist, cleared his throat. "We should focus on what's important. The first wake-up process is set for tomorrow. We need your decision." Dorian stopped pacing. "Why us? Why now?" "The science needs a special kind of DNA to work," Dr. James said. "Your father's and your mother's genes help make the process stable." "And why now?" Dorian asked again. Christina stepped away from the window. "Keeping these people asleep takes a lot of power. We've been using energy from the city, but people are starting to notice. We have to act before we get caught." "That's why the blackouts in the lower city are worse?" Emily asked. "You're taking power from people who already don't have enough?" "For the greater good," Dr. James said smoothly. "Imagine how many lives we could save. Sick people could sleep until we find a cure. People in accidents could be kept safe. This could change the world. And make a lot of money." Dorian added coldly. "Who owns the patents?" "That's why we need you," Christina said. "Both of you. We can make sure this is used the right way, only for medical help. No military deals, no secret sales." Emily pressed her hand against the glass, looking at the sleeping people. "Who are they?" Dr. James and Christina exchanged looks. "Volunteers," Christina said carefully. "People who believed in the project." "Liar," Dorian snapped. He held up a journal. "I finally figured out what this says. They aren't volunteers. They're people who found out the truth about this project, about the bad things you did with money and medicine, and you put them to sleep to keep them quiet." Christina's face changed. "Sometimes hard choices must be made." "That's not protection," Emily said, feeling sick. "That's a prison." "It's temporary," Dr. James insisted. "Once we make this public." "You mean once you control the story?" Dorian interrupted. "So no one knows the full truth?" The room fell silent. The machines hummed around them, sounding like fake breathing. Emily, Christina said softly, everything I did was for you and Lena. I wanted a better world for you. Emily stepped away from the window, moving closer to Dorian. No, everything you did was about control. You wanted to play God. Dr. James's friendly smile faded. So you won't help us? Dorian took Emily's hand. We will help, he said, but not the way you want. The room changed in an instant. Security guards moved forward, reaching for their weapons. Dr. James's face darkened. I'm afraid we can't accept that answer, he said. You don't have a choice, Emily said. She pulled out her phone and showed them the screen. A live video was playing, showing everything they had just said. Maddie has been watching the whole time, Dorian explained. So have reporters and federal agents. Did you really think I'd come here without backup? Christina's calm look cracked. Emily, please. It's over, Emily said. It's time for everyone to wake up. As if her words made it happen, alarms started ringing. Red lights flashed as doors opened. The sleeping people in the beds began to move. Machines turned off one by one. Dr. James jumped toward a control panel, but Dorian tackled him away. Christina reached for Emily. Everything I did was for love, she said. Emily looked at her mother, not as the parent she lost, but as a woman who chose power over family. Love doesn't keep secrets, she said. Love doesn't hide. The sound of sirens came from above. Federal agents rushed in, arresting people. Emily watched as her mother was led away in handcuffs. Dorian wrapped his arms around her. Are you okay? He whispered. No, Emily said honestly. But I will be. We have a lot of people to wake up. Project Lazarus was ending, but something new, something true was just beginning. The sun rose over New Orleans, washing the city in light. Emergency vehicles crowded the streets. Inside, doctors and nurses worked hard to help the waking patients. Emily sat in a corner, wrapped in a blanket, still wearing the fancy dress from the night before. She watched Dorian standing beside his father, William Wells, who was just waking up. Miss Carter? A gentle voice called. Emily looked up to see an FBI agent. I know it's been a long night, but we need your statement. Before Emily could answer, Maddie walked in, looking perfect as always. My lawyers will handle it, she said. The families need time first. The agent frowned, but Maddie just smiled. We've already given you all the proof. The rest can wait. The agent left. Maddie sat beside Emily. Lena's on her way. I sent a car for her. Thank you, Emily said, her voice tired. Dorian is my brother, Maddie said simply. And you, well, you're the first person to make him feel real in a long time. She nodded toward Dorian, who was staring at his father. He's going to need you, Maddie added. Emily got up and walked over to Dorian. He grabbed her hand tightly. Father? Dorian said. William blinked, looking confused. Then he recognized his son. Dorian? How long? 5 years, Dorian said. Project Lazarus is over. William gave a bitter laugh. Nothing is ever over, son. The science still exists. It nearly destroyed this city, Dorian said, and our family. William looked at Emily, then at Christina, who was locked in another room. He understood. Ah, Christina's daughter, he said. So this is my punishment. This isn't about punishment, Emily said. It's about truth. It's about choosing who we want to be. In another part of the room, a mother hugged her teenage children who had grown up while she was asleep. They cried with happiness and sadness at the same time. William watched them, something strange in his eyes. The world wasn't ready, he said softly. The power to stop death, humans can't be trusted with it. Including you? Dorian asked. William met his son's eyes. Especially me, he sighed. Your mother would be disappointed in what I became. She taught me that power without kindness is just violence, Dorian said. I forgot that for a while, but I'm remembering now. Emily turned toward the door as Lena ran in, still in pajamas. The sisters hugged tightly. Is it true? Lena whispered. Mom's alive? Yes, Emily said. But she's not who we thought she was. Lena pulled back, wiping tears. And you? Are you okay? Emily managed a small smile. Getting there. We have a lot to talk about. Dr. Wells walked up to Maddie and said, "The first checkup is done. Everyone is okay except for their weak muscles, but they will get stronger soon." Maddie nodded. "This new machine that kept them frozen for so long is amazing, but also very dangerous. My team is working to make sure no one can use it without rules." William laughed. "You think you can stop people from trying to copy it?" "Maybe not," Dorian said. "But this time, we will be watching. No more secrets. No more playing God." Just then, a police officer came in. "We need to take the people we caught now." Emily watched as her mother, Christina, was taken away in handcuffs. Their eyes met, and Christina looked at her, begging for forgiveness. But Emily looked away. Some mistakes were too big to forgive easily. "What will happen to the company?" William asked. "Maddie and I will change it," Dorian said. "We will focus on helping people. No more secrets, no more hurting others. We will use our money to help poor communities." William closed his eyes and sighed. "Your mother would be proud." Then he looked at Emily. "Christina was right about one thing. You and Dorian together are very strong, but not because of power, because you want to do good." The sun was shining now, making the cold machines in the room look less scary. Emily thought, "These machines are not bad or good. It all depends on the people who use them." Dorian took Emily's hand. "Let's go. The police will handle the rest." As they walked out, Lena joined them. Behind them, the officers locked the doors to the lab. Project Lazarus was over. Outside, the city of New Orleans was waking up. A new day had begun, full of hope. 3 months later, the Café Beignet was busy as usual. The morning sun shone through the new windows, making the steam from coffee cups sparkle. Powdered sugar covered the tables, just like always. Emily moved between tables, but she wasn't wearing her old waitress uniform anymore. She sat down across from Dorian and said, "The workers say we can start building the community health center next month." Dorian smiled. "That's great. Did we pick the right place?" "Yes, it's near 3 bus stops, so people can get there easily," Emily said, showing him the plans. "Lena is working with the medical school, so students can help there too." The bell above the door rang. Maddie walked in, looking as fancy as always, but now she wore colorful clothes instead of just black and gray. "Sorry I'm late," she said. "The meeting went long, but good news. We got 5 years of money to help the community." Emily sighed in relief. The company had changed from being selfish to truly helping people. It had been hard work, but moments like this made it worth it. "How is your dad doing?" Dorian asked. "Better," Maddie said. His therapy is helping. He's even thinking about writing a book about everything that happened. Of course, lawyers will check it first." The trial was still happening. Christina and Dr. James had told the truth about others who did bad things, so they got shorter jail time. The machine from Project Lazarus was now being watched by the world, only used for medicine. "Have you visited Mom?" Lena asked, walking up with her school books. "Last week," Emily said. "She's changing. She's becoming more like the mom we remember. Her counseling is helping. Maybe when she gets out of jail, we can all try again," Lena said with hope. She kissed Emily's cheek and rushed off to class. "Order ready for table 5, Grace called from the kitchen. "I got it," Dorian said, standing up before Emily could. Maddie smiled. "When I introduced you two at this cafe, I never thought it would end like this." Emily grinned. "You mean Dorian bringing coffee to tables?" Dorian laughed. "She means all of us finding our way." This cafe had become more than just a place to eat. Important business talks happened here over coffee and beignets. The customers got used to seeing Emily running meetings one moment and helping in the kitchen the next. She had bought the cafe last month, but Grace still ran the kitchen. Some things didn't need change. Outside, the city was waking up. Musicians played jazz on the streets. Tourists were coming back, but now, thanks to the foundation, they were supporting local businesses too. The newspaper wants to do a story on how businesses are being responsible after Project Lazarus, Maddie said. Let them, Dorian said. No more hiding in the shadows. Emily squeezed his hand. They had kept their love secret during the trial, but now they didn't need to hide. When reporters found out, they loved the story. Two people falling in love while helping their city heal. I should get to work, Maddie said, standing up. Some of us still have offices. After she left, Dorian and Emily sat quietly, watching the morning crowd slow down. Soon the lunch rush would start. Do you regret anything? Dorian asked suddenly. Emily thought about her mother in jail, but finally being honest. About William learning to care about family, about the new projects growing in the city, about Lena loving medical school. No, she said, we can't change the past, but we can build something better. She smiled. Besides, that first kiss was worth it. Dorian laughed and hugged her. That kiss changed everything. Not everything, Emily said. Some things were always true. We just had to see them. Outside, a jazz band played What a Wonderful World. The music mixed with the smell of coffee and the morning sun. Emily rested her head on Dorian's shoulder, listening to his heartbeat. There were still meetings to have, decisions to make, and problems to solve. Healing took time for families and cities, but right now, everything was perfect. I love you, Dorian whispered. Emily smiled. I love you too. The sun rose higher over New Orleans, bringing a new day full of possibilities. In the kitchen, Grace taught a new worker how to make beignets. At the university, Lena was already studying hard. In a tall office, Maddie was shaping a business into something good. And in a small cafe, Emily and Dorian held hands, knowing that the most valuable things in life weren't money or power. The most important things were love, honesty, and the little moments that made life special. Thanks for watching. If you liked the story, don't forget to subscribe, like, and share your thoughts in the comments. Check out our other videos too. See you in the next one.